With that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Chris Miller. Currently serving as Executive Director of Adult Education for Calhoun Community College in Decatur, Alabama, Chris has over 37 years of experience in adult education. In addition to extensive time spent in direct instruction and as a local program director, Chris has most recently worked in the state office developing and implementing a statewide training approach for all adult education instructors in preparation for the 2014 GED test. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Allison, and I too would like to thank everyone who's joined. So welcome to today's presentation on applying Common Core in reading and writing, and a look at how Webb's DOK is applied to reading and writing. I'm sure that as we maneuver through this 2014 test, more information and resources will be forthcoming. But for now, let's take a look at what we have. We are all probably at different phases of implementing new direct instruction and strategies for imparting the information, but a clear understanding of the standards will be most helpful as a guide through the instructional process. And as we look through and see how reading and writing has been affected, we look at the 2014 test measures with the new standards for reading and writing. We're very fortunate that OVE took the lead and in April released the college and career readiness standards. And I think probably, and I'm not going to do a whole lot of recapping on things that most of us have heard for the last year about the Common Core and standards and the different ways that it's going to affect our lives from here on. But I do want to just give enough so that we can all be on the same page with this. As OVE presented the readiness standards, we know that those came from the college and career, or those came from the Common Core standards, and now they're pared down so that we do have some that are manageable. And in reading, we have 10 anchor standards, and in writing, 10 anchor standards, and language, pretty much 6 that we're going to be working with. But I think that we all need a clear understanding of standards to help us guide our instruction. So with that, let's look at the reading first. And as we look, we know some changes have come about, and the reading sections, the passages, the links, will be increased to 450 to 900 words, which, for, as most of you know, most of our readers, most of our students, don't do a lot of reading anyway, and this is going to be one challenge for us, is to help them extend their reading past short passages. The text will be now 25% fictional, 75% non-fictional, which is what we're going to talk quite a bit about today. We've also got a synthesis through reading, the ability to read closely, to pay attention. They're going to have to learn how to pay attention, and to analyze, interpret, and evaluate the text. Let's first look at the word synthesis through reading. Synthesis is the most complex reading strategy. It is with this synthesis that there is a continuum of evolving thinking. And if you think about this on a continuum line, it goes from the understanding of the text while reading to ultimately achieving new insight from the text. So how do we do this in our classrooms? Reading and getting them to read is hard enough, but to have them be a synthesis through reading reader will take some skills that we need to work with the students on. So let's look at one technique, and that is, if we give the students 2 or 3 paragraphs to read, we have them stop every so often and think about what he or she has read. Then have the student integrate those words and ideas within the text into their personal thoughts and positions on what they've read. This will help the readers process the text, and then have them read and retell the concepts, the themes, and the overall meaning. One exercise to do is called GIST, G-I-S-T, and it's a fun little exercise that when the students have read the 2 or 3 paragraphs, up on the board you can write or draw 20 boxes. have the students at random call out different descriptors that they have read in those 2 or 3 paragraphs so that they have put it actually in a format where they can see the text on the board. And this will really give them a better understanding. And the more they do this, the more it becomes natural in the way of thinking about what they've read and being able to pull it in together and to get to the point where they are achieving that new insight from the text. Another word that I want to talk about on this frame is the ability to analyze. If you look at the definition of analyze, it means literally to take something apart. And with all the shifts and the changes that we're seeing in the 2014 test, to be able to analyze is a critical skill that all of our students are going to need to understand and to become better at. So to take it apart in order to understand it better is something that's going to be critical for them to understand. And so we look at the text to analyze. We have to decide how to analyze that. We need to teach them in what context is this text that they're looking at. Is it a social context? Is it something about a specific point of view, such as a communication aspect? Then it's our response, it's our problem, our task to help them in transitioning from that thought process into a written process, to giving answers and to give feedback on the text. And as we've learned before too, we have history, social studies, science, technology. The 75% nonfiction is going to come from an interdisciplinary approach. And this is going to be, I think, really good for our learners to get a lot of information that's going to carry and transform them through their walks in life and to help them with whatever path they choose in college and career readiness activities. The students need to be proficient readers of the complex text. And that complex text, the informational, is going to be throughout all the areas, all of the interdisciplinary approach. And remember, this is the goal, is to reflect a college and workforce training program with the structure and the challenging content that is intended for a college and workforce training program. Informational text does provide an opportunity to extend the range of topics to be explored. We can look at topics from science, social studies that are not generally found in fiction, but when they're in textbooks, which sometimes criticized for their lack of depth and for the delivery of uninspiring facts, we are able to bring about information that can be examined through different modalities. Let's just take space exploration. Living in Huntsville, that's particularly close to me because we can look at that through the natural sciences, the physical sciences, even through history and through reading a biography, which gives the information, gives the text, gives the information more depth and dimension to the learner. And hopefully will help them understand and enjoy reading more. So now the shifts. Let's look at the shifts in the standards, and I really like to look at this as shifts really in instruction. It is with the standards, but we're really taking a shift in instruction so that we look at the first one, which is complexity. And this means, and we need to guide our students through, a regular practice with these complex texts. It's something they need to be doing every day. And the academic language that's attached to those different texts. We have the ability to teach them to read the complex text and understand that this, for some research, has been found to be the greatest predictor of success in career and college readiness. ACT did a study, and what they have found and what they did was that they put emphasis on Standard 10, which we'll look at in just a second, but they conducted research in 2006 which showed that in the reading section, the ACT college administered admissions test, only 51%, and that's out of roughly 500,000 test takers, achieved the benchmark of 21 out of 36. Now, the chief distinguisher for that was that students was the ability to answer questions associated with the complex text. So we knew there was a problem. It wasn't necessarily their ability to do the things that we teach in the classrooms a lot, and that's making inference, determining main idea, meaning of words. But while it's critical that we focus on these higher order thinking skills, what students can read in terms of complexity is at least as important as to what they can do with what they've read. So when we look at complex text, we have a range of content, which is very good. We can look at it across the genres. We can look at the topics, the cultures, the generations, and have a vast array of different source text for them to read. And hopefully, students will get a lot of information and learn to enjoy reading from this. We need to look and understand, too, that there's currently a gap between the secondary text and the college and career ready text. Research is documented, and it's been a steady decline, that Gene Shaw in 1963 and some of our colleagues did a study in the reading demands of the K-12 text. This decline was evidenced in sentence length and vocabulary level in reading textbooks at various grades. So we really need to look at the instructional practices that foster, and this word independent, because this is what we're trying to do with our students, is to move them from classroom instruction and reading to become independent readers. We're not going to be there when they're testing. So we need to give them the skills and the tools so that when they hit those tests, they're going to feel comfortable with it, and that they can foster independent reading of complex text. And that's going to be crucial for them in college and career readiness, too. We must also encourage and challenge our students to read more than just the narrative. They need to be exposed to expository text and develop the reading strategies associated with that. The expository test to make up a vast majority of reading required in the college and in the workplace. This is Standard 10, and this has been what has brought about a lot of the shift in terms of complexity that we're living with right now. So Standard 10 reads, read and comprehend complex literary and informational text independently and proficiently. And that is going to be a key thing that we need to understand and be able to work with in the classroom. Now, let's look at shift 2. The second shift really brings about reading, writing, speaking, because speaking and listening are interwoven into the reading and the writing standards. But in this, they need to be grounded in this evidence from the reading and the writing and the speaking from both the literary and the informational text. These standards require learners to answer questions based on their understanding of what they've read, not entirely from their prior knowledge, but that they can cite evidence from the text and present careful analysis that are well-defended claims and clear information. We're going to see this transition into the writing that the students are required to do also. So we've got students that are really going to have some challenges ahead of them. But not only the students, the teachers, all of us are going to be challenged in getting our students to be successful in these different standards. Look at the shift in instruction for the third one, which is knowledge. And we need to understand that shift number 3, we need to build knowledge through content-rich nonfiction. We've got all the disciplines that are being pulled into the English and the language art section, so that we have all of the resources out there to pull towards us for the different ways of reading. But we need to build that knowledge base and understand that the comprehension skills are critical for them to gain the knowledge that they're going to need. We also need to be cognizant of the reasons that many of our learners have difficulty in comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. And that is that many times they meet with topics in which they lack the prior knowledge and experience. They just don't have it within their frame. And they are going to need to more likely rely on conversational language that really is going to be inadequate to understanding the content and the technical terminology, and resulting in limited comprehension. Even if they have mastered a decoding skill, they still need to be able to have a higher language and have more than just their conversational language to build the knowledge from. And while we're talking about vocabulary, vocabulary is probably the most single important skill that we can give to our students now. Every part of the 2014 test and all the information that we're getting has to do with vocabulary and its importance in reading, in writing, even in the math section. Vocabulary is going to be critical for success. And understand that we really have, when we're talking about conversational language, we have 3 vocabularies. And one is the vocabulary that we hear every day. And our students have a broad vocabulary when it comes to their hearing, and for most of the time they're speaking vocabulary. But when we look at speaking and hearing, because those senses are used so much, then sometimes their reading vocabulary is not as high as their speaking and their listening. So we need to try to get all 3 of those up to a similar level so that they can feel comfortable and know that they're really being able to talk the talk, if you will, to be able to converse on a level where they feel comfortable. So how do we know? We've got these standards. We've got these shifts. We've got complexity shift. We have a shift in evidence that's going to have to be shown, and we have the shift in the knowledge that's going to have to be imparted. How do we know what the right text is? How do we know when it's too easy? How do we know when it's too difficult for our students? What are the right texts in terms of the content that we need to work with? And how do we evaluate those tests? Fortunately, the Common Core State Standards has given us a 3-part model, an outline, if you will, of a way to measure the text complexity based on 3 different items. One is the quantitative measure, qualitative analysis, and the third is matching the reader and the task and the considerations between the 2. So let's take a look real quickly at the quantitative measure. And we have the readability, which there are several things that we can use to determine readability and to score text complexity. But we also need to look at the complexity of nuances, to have verbiage in the passage that may be subtle, that may not be just staring them in the face, that they're going to need to be able to kind of pick out. We need to look, when we're looking at quantitative measuring of complexity, the word length frequency, the sentence length, text cohesion. All those things give us a measure of what the quantitative complexity could be. Now, there were 6 different computer programs, if you look at the chart on the screen right now, and I can't point, but on the left-hand side you see the Common Core band. And the Common Core band are grade equivalencies that are grouped. 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 6 through 8. You notice that's a broader gap. Kind of reminds us of NRS, doesn't it? 9 and 10, and 11 through the college and career readiness. With the 6 different computer programs that you see across the top, each one has been approved, and if you want some more information on this chart and to learn more about the readability and these different computer programs, the Common Core website in Appendix A, it will give you all about this, the bands and the different formulas that exist for measuring these readability of the various texts. But the formulas, the ones that are shown in the picture, usually all of them, typically use the word length and the sentence length as substitutes for semantics and syntactic complexity when they're judging the readability. So the basic assumption is that the longer the word, the longer the sentence, the more difficult it is to read. The research has found that all quantitative metrics were reliable, all 6 of them that they judged, and they often correlated very well with the grade level and with student performance. So if you're looking for a way to kind of see where your readability is, look at one of the 6. I particularly like the Lexile Framework, and I chose that to kind of give you a little bit of information about, and you can look at the rest of them and see one of them may fit you better. But I like Lexile because, like the Dale-Chall readability formula, and both of them, by the way, were developed by MetaMatrix Incorporated, they use word frequency and sentence length to produce a single measure of a text complexity, and that complexity is called the Lexile. But this framework is a little different from the others because it places both the reader and the text on the same scale. So you have the reader, the learner, the student, and you've got the text, and you can put you're better able to match them. Or you can use the Common Core band and look at some of the others that are in this same framework. If you look at the Lexile Framework, though, there's some things that you can and can't do with it. It's not used to measure student writing or poetry or multiple choice questions or any of the unconventional or formatted text, but it is good and proper to be used. Newspaper, magazine articles, books, short stories, web pages, things that you would look toward for information. So your informational text will have a good Lexile rating, and you can find out more about that on the web too. We just don't have time today to go into the specifics, but there are really some very good ways to judge the complexity of the passages. Now, let's look at the next qualitative evaluation for judging text complexity. And here we've got 4 factors that we can look toward to evaluate. And let's look at the first one. The first of the 4 qualitative factors is the level of meaning. And many times in a text we have multiple and sometimes often implicit levels of meaning. That's hard for some of us, it's hard for me sometimes, but especially our students who are not used to having to look at implicit meanings. But we can also see the need for the surface levels too, which often are the literal meanings. So for the judgment, for one of the factors for qualitative, we need to look at the level of meaning for one of the factors. The next would be the structure. And this structure can range from relatively simple, explicit, and conventional to more complicated and complex things like digression, or to add complexity to it, looking at chronological order. The next factor is language conventionality and clarity, and that ranges from very familiar, clear, conversational, detailed, to different dialects that impose a lot of challenges for readers, and sometimes words that require inference for understanding. And think about when you were in college, or if you've ever been exposed to reading Old English, Middle English, how foreign that sounds, and really it is foreign. But it's hard to understand. And if we're reading things in poetry, the Shakespearean, you think about how hard it is to follow the drift sometimes. And even in colloquialisms, different dialects from different parts of the country. When it's written, sometimes it's very hard to understand. If we're speaking it, that's a different situation sometimes when we kind of get a better. So if we vary the instruction up, reading out loud sometimes helps, but be sensitive to the different ways that we have to think about the different dialects that are within the written word. Then we have, for the fourth, knowledge demands. And we look at different levels of sophistication and background knowledge for this. Sometimes we need to know the prior experiences and the background knowledge for better understanding. If students were reading a passage on a religion, or say the Great Depression, if there's something that can connect that student with some background knowledge prior to reading, you can get a much better understanding. Now, when the test comes about and they're sitting in front of that test, they're not going to have time to have the luxury of being able to look it up, or the teacher. So the more we can do in the classroom to help the students get prior knowledge, prior experiences, even talking about things in the classroom, are going to help them a whole lot, so that their background knowledge and different ways of evaluation of the text is going to be more complete. So that's our qualitative evaluation, those four factors. The next and last is our ability to match the reader and the text. And there are some variables that need to be determined, and these need to be determined locally and individually in the classroom for each student. And they need to come into play in the text selection for the students also. A student's ability to read complex text does not always develop in a very linear fashion. The progression of Standard 10, as it's defined, is a grade-by-grade growth. It usually doesn't happen that way. Students will jump from one level to another and back to another at different points in time, depending upon what they're reading. And students need to be challenged. They need to be given the attention and the resources necessary to develop the reading ability at an appropriate advanced pace, but not to the point where the experience is unpleasant and turns them off from reading. Some of them have already faced that anyway. So we need to watch for the text within the student's text complexity grade band, and even from the next higher band. If you're going to go up to the next band, go to the bottom of the next band. There's some techniques that are used when we teach reading. One is called scaffolding, and scaffolding may be needed as they master the higher levels of text complexity. And scaffolding, let me just go through that, is modeling the task. It's coaching the students. It's giving them information to help them advance their reading skills. And understand that this can be used, but eventually and gradually we need to move toward decreasing the scaffolding and increasing independent reading. So now we've looked at a few of the standards. We've looked at the shifts in readability, but now what are we going to do? What resources can we use, and what can be effective? Let's look for a few minutes at something called differentiated instruction. And know that we're going to get I know we've done reading, but we're going to get to writing here in just a few minutes. But let's look at differentiated reading. instruction for just a second, because this really provides the students an opportunity to learn. We need to look at some of the good things about this is that there is a range of formats for their learning, that the informational text can be from one end of the spectrum to the other, and that their range in reading abilities can be attended to, and their learning modalities. Not one size fits all, but not even sometimes one size fits most. But we have the learning modalities that we need to be consciously aware of and use from student to student so that we can get this instruction across to them. We owe this to our students so that they can demonstrate their knowledge and feel like they're meeting with success. Now, if we look at differentiated learning, we know that there are differences in structure and purpose when we look at the various types of text. And sometimes these will hinder comprehension. A combination of explicit instruction highlighting the differences and multiple opportunities to interact with the text can be useful to the struggling reader. By incorporating information about the structure and format of the informational text and discussing the purpose of it will help them understand the difference in fiction and nonfiction reading. If you have some informational text, look at the differences in even the format of it. In an informational text, you're going to have a table of contents. You're going to have a glossary. There is now the ability to use vocabulary from the text into the classroom to expand vocabulary, discussion questions, anything that will give learners valuable activities to interact with the informational text and develop into something that they feel good about and something they're getting something from. Because we'll read when we need information, and if we can tap into what the student is interested in and bring it to life for them, then we're going to have a more engaged student and a more successful student. For adults, it is estimated that 86% of the reading that they do is drawn from the factual text in order to gather information. And it's not surprising then that developing the skills that build the comprehension from informational text has been cited as an urgent priority. And I think we're seeing this as we go through the new standards and into the new instructional process that we're doing, is that we've got to be able to have the students regular opportunities to utilize these texts so that they can build vocabulary that will fill the gaps for them, that they will develop strategies for reading this type of text, and it will strengthen their comprehension. So now let's look at evidence-based learning, because if we're going to be drawn from all different sorts of text, if we're going to be able to give the students what they need, we need to make sure that we have a successful research-based program. And simply, the definition of evidence-based learning is that a particular program or instructional practice has a record of being successful, and that it is reliable, trustworthy, and valid. And if you look at shift 2, that shift talks about the evidence that learners are going to have to be able to show through their reading and writing. But we also, as a professional group, need to make sure that we're using evidence-based instructional practice to give them that information and to give them what they need and deserve. If we look at the other side of that, which is the learning that goes on, how are we going to document that? Because we all know, and especially those of us that have been around a few years, documentation is everything, and that if we can't see it in black and white and in Table 4, 4B, and 5, then, it probably didn't happen. So we need to make sure that what counts as evidence of success is evidence. So it should be objective, valid, reliable, systematic, and independently reviewed. Let's look at writing for a few minutes because we're coming close toward the end, and I want to make sure that we cover writing and Webb's DOK as it refers to the reading and the writing section of the standards. So let's look at it for a second at the writing. Writing, of course, measures the student's ability to understand language and its mechanics. It's basically what we've always been doing. Subject-verb agreement, verb tense, prepositions, the whole 9 yards on the mechanics of language. But in terms of writing, the writing will show how well the students are comprehending the reading, both in the fictional and the non-fictional material. And this is going to be evidenced, here again, through the essays that they write and through the extended responses that they write. So it's so very important that we continue to give them their vehicle for assessing their language skills through comprehension of what they've read and written. Now, writing, the emphasis will need to be placed on the informational and persuasive writings because there are several different ways to impart this knowledge. But as the learners, we need to help them become very comfortable with using reasoning skills, using the text to show how they have the evidence and the support through their writing. So reasoning skills, how do we teach these critical skills? Several different ways. If we look at techniques in the classroom and we're looking at writing, as we are with reading, and the emphasis is on the informational and persuasive writing, let's look at having the students observe and draw conclusions. Let them give us detailed observation. If a student asks the teacher why, I would hope the teacher at some point in time can respond back, why do you think? Put it back on the student. Get them interactive and engaged with the conversation and the subjects so that they are critically thinking, that they're not relying on that instructor for the feedback to tell them how they're thinking. So we've got to change the way we work a little bit. Second way might be to compare and contrast. It's a very important skill that they are going to need to learn. And here we go with the word analyze again. That they can tear apart the things that they've read in order to write them so that they can discuss, analyze, retell. So the next one would be to learn cooperatively. A lot of times we get into a rut, I think, of working with individual students when we really need to be looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the students within the classroom and pair these students up so that they can learn cooperatively and share and learn. Another way is to provide stories without the conclusion. If you were to give a student a story and leave off the end of it, how do you think they would come about with the answer? What do you think happens next? How much fun would it be to see the different responses? So provide stories without conclusions. There's another method that I'd like to take a look at very quickly too, and it's the Socratic method. And you know, Socrates was famous for teaching critical thinking through questioning. And he would have fun with his learners, and I think we could have fun with our learners too, to turn the tables on them and take the opposite position and have them defend it, to defend their position. I was observing a teacher the other day, and she had a huge box in her room, and I said, you know, what is that box for? And she said, when I have students take positions on a subject, I will have the students stand in the box, 2 or 3 at a time. When they start to defend their position and they are going off maybe off the reservation or their point of view. She literally has them step out of the box to give their explanation and to give their defending position. So there's different ways we can engage and help students go through the writing exercises. While reading expectations are more rigorous, writing has its challenges too. And if we look at asserting or defending a position, showing knowledge of a subject, conveying experiences, we need to look, let's look at the first one. Asserting and defending a position is really a position paper, isn't it? And we've all had to write those in college. And a position paper presents an arguable position about an issue. But the goal of that position paper is to convince an audience. Important for two reasons. One is that the students have to learn how to support with evidence. Second, the students show that they are well informed about both sides. And again, critical skill for our students is to analyze the issue and develop their own positions. Also, the emphasis in the classroom needs to be to support that by including factual knowledge, informed opinion, personal experiences, anything we can teach them to draw upon to be able to put forth their side of the evidence. Showing knowledge of a subject is very important too, because it gives us the opportunity to increase teaching time as opposed to independent study. If we can give them enough time each day, each lesson, each class time, so that we can impart and give them the opportunity to learn, we have engaged them, and hopefully they can become better learners. Conveying experiences, and that's sharing both verbally and written. Now, these skills help prepare. As you listen to what I'm saying, I hope you're looking at it from a college standpoint and from a training standpoint. So that's, remember, what the purpose of the shifts are for, is to help prepare our students for college and career training programs. Okay, writing again for the career in college is that we must prepare them to be able to choose words, to have information, to understand structures, and to be able to use different formats for different kinds of writing, and to know how to combine the elements of the different kinds of writing. What is the task? What's the purpose? Who is your audience? These are skills that we must consider in the writing classroom. And I wasn't moving. There we go. Writing. This is the last frame on it, but we need to look at the writing targets, the practice that we need to have our students do in order to understand what text types and the purposes. Writing arguments to support claims using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. To write the explanatory text and the effective selection, analysis of the content, things we've gone over today to make a total person well informed and hopefully to help them with the college and career readiness objectives. Okay, now let's look at a way, I know everybody's favorite, Webb's depth of knowledge. But as with the depth of knowledge for the math, we have depth of knowledge for the reading also. We have, I did not include level 4 because we know that level 4 is probably not going to be included, and really level 4 necessitates the longitudinal either experiments or readings over a length of time with writings to support that. So it's not something that we would be able to do in a testing or assessment type situation. So we're going to look at DOK for reading level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1, let's take a quick look at it. And it requires the students to use simple skills and abilities to recall. And remember, if you've looked at DOK for the math, there again, recall and locate the bare minimum facts from the text. The focus is on the initial comprehension, not on analysis or interpretation. The items require only a shallow or literal understanding of the text presented, and it often consists of a verbatim recall of the text, a simple understanding of just a simple word or a simple phrase. So that's level 1. Level 2 requires both initial comprehension and subsequent processing of the text or portions of the text. Important concepts are covered in this level, but not in a very complex way. Items, you may see words such as paraphrase, summarize, interpret, infer, classify, compare, determine whether it's fact or opinion. So you see, it's gradually becoming a skill that is a little bit more complex, and the items may require the students to apply the skills and concepts that are still covered in level 1 and would be considered a level 2. Level 3 requires the depth of knowledge, a deep knowledge. Students are encouraged to go beyond the text and are asked to explain, to generalize, to connect ideas, that they must be able to support their thinking, citing references from the text and other sources. The items may involve abstract theme identification, inferences between and across passages, and the student's application of prior knowledge. And here again, we have the need for our classes to incorporate more prior knowledge in our instruction, and literally to the text to support for an analytical judgment to be made about a text. So there we have the levels and some of the descriptors. There is level 4 is not included, but if you'll look on the screen and see that all the levels, there are a whole list for each level of criteria, from recall to basic reasoning to complex reasoning, and then the extended reasoning in level 4. But those are just some things that I've included so that you can see Webb COK and the descriptors for Webb COK. So, reading and writing. How can we meet the challenge? We need to know that we need to analyze and be honest about where we are in our teaching and how we have our classes set up and the information that we impart. Think of ways that we can improve the way we impart knowledge and the way our students receive it. We've got to get out of our comfort zone to make for positive changes. And remember, knowledge has no power unless it's applied. Thank you very much for today, and I enjoyed being with you. Thank you, and turn it back over to Allison.
Thanks, Chris. We hope you all gain invaluable knowledge that you can take into your classrooms right away. Before we jump into question and answers with Chris, we'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the exciting new products we have available for 2014 success. McGraw-Hill Contemporary has been a trusted partner in adult education for over 40 years and remains committed to providing you and your students with the resources needed to meet the challenges we've discussed today head-on. Because of this, we present the Common Core High School Equivalency Series. It strives for more than just helping students pass their test. It offers a budget-friendly curriculum that prepares students for test success while developing the foundation for ongoing college and career readiness. Not just aligned, but built from the ground up on the Common Core and college and career readiness standards, This exciting new series includes a suite of 3 brand new programs: Common Core Basics, Common Core Achieve, and Power Up, Getting Started with Computers and Keyboarding. All 3 programs prepare adult learners and educators for the shift to new standards. They adapted to these standards by focusing on instruction around evidence-based reading instruction and Webb steps of knowledge. And they help students achieve not only test success, but a strong foundation for college and career readiness. Common Core Basics is for adult learners with a 6th to 8th grade level equivalent. It focuses on the foundational skills needed to begin preparing for any Common Core-based high school equivalency exam. Common Core Achieve is for adult learners with a 9th to 12th grade level equivalent. It focuses on core content instruction needed to actively prepare for any Common Core-based high school equivalency exam, but also includes the critical exercise, practice, and test preparations specific to each exam, including the 2014 GED, TASC, and HiSET. It provides solutions in both all print and all digital, allowing you the option to create a blended learning solution that meets all of your specific needs. And the series also prepares not only students for the new standards-based assessments, but you as the instructor as well, with a robust offering of program-specific support for every lesson and best practices. Professional development, your transition to Common Core will be seamless. And we haven't forgotten the fact that many students will be required to take their equivalency exam on a computer this year. For students needing a crash course in the basics, we offer Power Up, Getting Started with Computers and Keyboarding. It prepares students with the computer basic skills needed for computer-based test taking, college classes, and 21st century workplace. These exciting new programs prepare various levels of students and instructors for the shift to the Common Core and provide the critical computer skills needed to be successful on 2014 exams. But the Common Core High School Equivalency Series is so much more than just a test prep program. We invite you to take a closer look and find out how we'll help your students achieve on test day and beyond. Please visit us at www.commoncoreachieve.com to learn more about each of these programs, download samples, and find your sales rep to schedule a free strategy session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions and answers, and we'll have Chris answer a lot of these questions that have been coming through. Let me just open it up really quick. Chris, the first question is, hold on just a second. Is there a way we can go over what GIST stands for?
I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's to get the gist of it. I don't know that there's really a letter, a word for each letter, but to get the gist of it, you just throw out different pieces of the paragraphs that are there and develop a pattern of thinking about how the reading and the, how they should be thinking when they're reading.
Great. And then somebody asked for clarification. What is the third type of vocabulary? They have hearing, reading, and then they were missing the third one.
Sight.
Sight. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of questions about whether we're going to be sharing out PowerPoint slides and recordings. We'll send that out after the webinar along with a survey, and we'd really appreciate all of your feedback on that survey. Okay, we're running a little bit low on time, so we're going to try to get through a couple more questions, and then anything that we didn't get to, we'll follow up with those individuals through email after the webinar. Somebody had a question about the depth of knowledge. To move toward depth of knowledge level 3, does this not require even more rote memorization in keeping with prior knowledge?
Well, I think that rote memorization is important for some key things, but what we're trying to do is to get the students to think and to process information. If rote is needed for multiplication or different tasks, then it's good for those, but we really need to encourage the more than just recall.
Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to cut off the questions there just so we don't go over on time. Again, we'll be happy to follow up with individuals on their questions after the webinar through email. Thanks again for joining us, everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us this afternoon. We hope you gained invaluable knowledge that you can take into your classrooms right away.